Today is the fourth day of the February 86 7-day retreat. And we will sort of combine several questions. Two of them to start out with, which are often put either singly or together. What is thinking and what is attention? Attention or awareness or seeing. I'm using those words synonymously. Before coming to this topic, let me also say what somebody said in a meeting, namely, in listening to your talks, one realizes how easily one gets entangled in words. Toni's words, as he said. How entangled we are in words in general, just living in a network of words. So it's important to say here again, as we do so many times, that the words that are said are not what it is that they're pointing at. In looking at something here, jointly together, words are being used and selected. This person was referring to the fact that sometimes I say this is not a good word, maybe this is a better word. So can we be flexible about the words that are being used, not rigid? And if a word is not clear and one has a different association with this word than what one thinks Toni has, then we can bring that up in a meeting. To be light about language and listen broadly, deeply. Without opinion or prejudice, if that is possible. And to look whether one can see for oneself, not the meaning of the word, but something that is beyond the word. It reminds me, I'll take this ahead of time too, of a little incident this past December in Germany, being invited to friends where there were two little children. I happened to be in the room of the little boy, 2 years old. He wanted me to draw things with his pencil. He wanted Donald Duck to be drawn, which I couldn't do. And he sort of gave up on me. He was not insistent. And there was a nice little white box there, which to me looked like a potential house. So I drew a door onto the house. He had busied himself with other things, and then he came over to the table and he says, "What's this?" I said, "That's a door." And he laughed. He said, "Das ist doch keine Tür. Das ist eine Tür." He ran over to the door and banged with his little hands against the door. He said, "That's a door." So I looked at the door, and it was quite different from what I had drawn there. The handle was different, and there were two glass panels and little moldings, so I tried to incorporate that into my what I thought was a childlike door. But he didn't accept it. Kept running over there. There's no door. This is a door. This was the end of the drawing. It's actually interesting because we think with these simple drawings we express childlike perception, but we teach the child simple expressions for what the child sees, not in this abstract way at all. But that's not what I was going to talk about today. What is thinking and what is attention? We always stress and emphasize the utter importance to be able to see in oneself when thinking is taking place, which is not, it doesn't seem to be easy, but it is not difficult really. So let us try to do it right here, to see if we can see thinking taking place and where thinking comes from. If we ask ourselves what the weather was like this morning at 7 o'clock when we were eating breakfast, and taking that one was not sitting in a room which had no windows or was sleeping, what happens when this question is being asked? What was the weather like this morning at 7 o'clock? A memory comes up. One sees it, fog, some outline of trees and not very bright. Maybe it was some sound of, I don't even remember that, or there was sound of rain. But the memory is there, so the thinking about it can proceed. Or if we ask ourselves what the weather was like the first evening of retreat, can be a very vivid memory for those of us who drove here. It was icy, one can still see that, and maybe there were fears recorded at the same time in the brain, fear of gliding off the road or colliding with another car, fear of making it, so there's a very vivid memory. And one can think about what could have happened from that memory of that weather. If we ask ourselves what the weather was a year ago, may not have any memory of it at all. The mind draws a blank. But if one is really interested, one wants to find out what the weather was a year ago, then the brain can be active, either trying to remember with the help of remembered days. That was right the day before my birthday. Maybe one remembers it by that cue. Or one remembers where there are places that do record the weather. So one can think of driving to the weather station and look it up in a log there. If one asked oneself what the weather was 1,000 years ago, when there were no weather stations. There would be no memory of it. One couldn't possibly think about it. One could still speculate about it. And if one had always lived in a climate such as this, one would speculate. It may have been rainy or icy or snowy, cold. If one had never lived in any other place than a desert, one wouldn't speculate about ice and snow. One wouldn't have any memory of that, no knowledge of it. And so the speculation would still be based on what one knows about weather conditions in a desert. One can work with this oneself to really test out, find out whether thought can issue from anything but memory, of one kind or another. Memory and knowledge, which is memory. Knowledge that we have acquired through reading, studying, and of course all of our past experiences. One could say, well, what about new inventions or new things, new trends in art, music? Maybe something new, fresh, different is perceived without memory. But immediately, or very quickly, thinking operates on it, tries to symbolize it, put it into words or notes or color, design, and it becomes part of the accumulated memory again. The seeing something new may have had nothing to do with memory. The mind may have been completely free from that, in a state of stillness, quietness, openness. But what is perceived is quickly symbolized in terms of what one already knows. If it is a new experience of a landscape, one will say it was like such and such, similar to so and so. And now this question which comes up all the time, what really is attention? Can you say it again? Can you describe it again? And there we run into the difficulty expressed by this person that the words which describe attention are not attention. They're just words. And words themselves, language itself, could not operate without memory. And yet, as we said, if we take the language lightly, maybe something can be seen beyond the meaning of the words, the remembered meaning of the words. So what is attention? In looking right in front of one, there is a brown mat. Here I'm using words, but let's rather say there's this and this here, or something in front of one, a color, texture. can that be perceived simply as what it is, without the word coming in, without the description, which is based on memory? If one just sees this mat here, I'm using words, maybe easier to communicate, or looking out through the window, there's a chair, outline of a tree without leaves, a white background. Can that simply be perceived as it is? We have used the words, but the word chair, the word outline of a tree without leaves, those words are not what's actually there. What's actually there has to be looked at. Does one see that the word chair, the word tree, is not what's there? The word mat, the word rug, is not this. The way usually our perception proceeds, there may be a brief, an ever so brief perception of this, and then immediately the brain providing the word, rug, or carpet and mat. Let's just stick with one thing, carpet. Can everybody see carpet? And can one see that the word carpet is not this here? And can one look at this without the word? Just a simple perception. Different shades and a different texture. The way our perceptions usually proceed, the simple perception, then the word, and then, I don't like this kind of a rug. The color is blah. There's streaks in it. These things here, they look awful. Will it wear? The mind taking over again with like and dislike, the tastes dictating whether one likes it or not. It can go on and on. Why did they buy this kind of a thing? Why not another one? So there is the psychological reaction to what is perceived. Or one may say, this is really very nice, much nicer than the, what is it called, crackboard in the kitchen? Yeah. Aspenite in the kitchen. One may compare, like this in comparison to that. So, the simple perception of this, then the word carpet, and then very quickly I like it or I don't like it. It reminds me of such and such. I compare it with such and such, which is nicer or not so nice, which we call a psychological reaction to it. So can one see that the word rug and the psychological reaction to it are no longer this here? And in being engaged and entangled in the word and the psychological abstraction, one does not see this anymore. Or maybe very furtively. Maybe if one is very much against this kind of rug, one will perceive it distortedly, worse than it is. Or if one wants to have this rug and not some other rug, the mind will sort of blow it up, make it look nicer. All of this is the contribution of the brain functioning in this psychological reaction, which has to do with so many things. We could spend hours saying what it all is associated with. Now the question is, can the naming of this thing here as rug and the reacting to it, can that be perceived just as simply as the first perception of the rug or the tree out there? Can the awareness, whether it is of something external or something that goes on internally, can it be the same kind of a perception? Observation, awareness. Can one become aware as one is walking, sitting, standing, taking a hike through the woods, of what goes on in the brain and the body, which always responds to what is going on in the brain? To be aware or become aware of what's there, and then the immediacy of naming, and then the immediacy of reacting to it in terms of something or other, mostly like or dislike, or what it reminds one of, and then dwelling in the memory of what this scene with a creek flowing over and under the ice gradually melting, the cracking of it, what that reminds one of. It was such a nice day in my youth when I saw that. I was so happy then. The mind now being involved in memory and no more attending or seeing or hearing the creek. Can that itself be seen? Can that come into awareness? Same kind of awareness that perceives what is there for an instant, then labels it, then reacts to it, then associates memories with it, and then dwells in the memories or wherever it goes off to. Can there be a perception of that, an awareness, attention? This awareness has no judgment of what it is that is being perceived. Whether it is the naming, the reacting, the getting lost in associated memories. When this awareness dawns, it is just that. It is not judgmental. It has no judgment in it, because it is not a function of the judging brain, of the scanning brain. It takes place, it comes into being when the brain is not occupied with wanting, running away, judging. You could say, wait a minute, you made a big leap here. You said, can judging or can a psychological reaction to what is being perceived be seen, just as the rug is seen without a word, or the tree is seen without a word, so the psychological reaction be seen without any judgment. It can happen on the instant. It is an instantaneous awareness or insight or attention, which has nothing to do with what went on before. Is that possible? And we have to differentiate at this moment whether it is indeed instantaneous awareness without judgment, meaning without thought commenting on what's going on, or whether it is thinking about what is going on. Thinking is words, and now I'm judging, now I'm reacting, now I'm choosing and picking. And I shouldn't be doing that. That usually goes along with it. I should be attentive. But the reason that I'm really reacting psychologically is that this is such a strong habit with me, and on one goes. When I find the cause, look for the cause for that habit. In the past, that is not instantaneous awareness or perception. That is thinking about oneself, analyzing oneself. And in this process of reacting and then analyzing the reaction, there is a separation that has taken place in the brain between the I, the me, that is reacting to what it is seeing. I don't like this. Or this reminds me of what I experienced earlier. That's a separation from the immediacy of perception of the tree, the rug, or the river. In that immediate perception, there's no I. There's just the whole perception of it. But then the I coming in and saying, I like this, I don't like it. It reminds me of so and so, and then if there's a moment of awareness of this reacting, then the I again, I shouldn't be reacting. I should remain attentive. I should remain with this. Again, a separation, which happens in this stream of thinking in the brain. One thought separating itself from the rest of the thoughts. Saying I should, I shouldn't. And I must control this, or I must accept this. So when one speaks about being aware, or when there is this awareness, is there just what is, including a word coming up, a reaction coming up, but awareness instantly that there's a reaction now. One doesn't have to label it, one can see it. And no judgment. No one stepping outside of this and saying, I shouldn't be reacting, or I have to accept this as human nature that I'm reacting. Then there's a division. Do you see that? As long as there is this feeling of me, self, myself, I, who is operating on what is being perceived, must control it or must be open to it, there's inevitably separation and conflict. And that conflict expresses itself immediately physically. Because there is not a thought that flits through the mind that does not elicit some physical sensation and emotion. It is all an interlinked network of thoughts, sensations, and emotions. That's what this organism is, has grown up to be. And the question usually is, how can I get rid of this I that is the perpetrator of all my problems? But who is asking that question? It is the I that wants to be rid of itself because it has problems. When it has no problems, it doesn't think of getting rid of itself. If it is enjoying, somebody makes us feel good, accepted, loved, appreciated, then we don't question the burden of the I, of the self-image. Then it feels so good. Who would question something that feels good? But if there is really awareness, one sees that too is separation. Not in any moralistic sense, but in a real sense. That at that moment one dwells with this image and its good feelings, and the tree, the creek, the person next to one, the people around, when the whole earth and sky are just dim background music that one usually doesn't listen to anyways. So, what will bring about this flow of awareness, which, as thoughts, reactions, memories, associations come up, is not seriously interrupted? It is interrupted when there's reaction, because reaction is not awareness, it's a habitual, conditioned response. But awareness can kick in at any time. And see that, and can it see that without immediately kicking out in favor of another reaction? One has to ask, why do we feel so at home in our reactions? Maybe we don't, and yet we are constantly reacting rather than attending. Why? One can't answer this question, one has to watch it. to let it answer itself in the act as it happens. And if there's really wanting to know why is there this constant reaction, for, against, and then the reaction against the reaction, is it possible for that to slow down, quiet down? And one means what one asks. One doesn't just ask it casually. Then awareness is there because one must find out. I think most human beings, if not all human beings, somewhere, maybe at one time in their lives, have looked for something that is not automatic, mechanical, old. Blinding and dulling. There is this real longing to be alive. At the same time, an incredible fear to be alive. Because to be alive means to be utterly vulnerable. Vulnerable to all that has been habitually repressed within humankind, either repressed or then exploding. We want something that is other than our daily routines, which leave us almost no time for any quiet moment or a moment of wonder. Of quiet wonder. Can one begin to quietly wonder at what's happening right now within this unfathomably complex organism that is sitting here? With the totality of the past being gelled here in this instant of being. Not gelled, that's not the right word. It's here. Can this longing for stillness and wonder about some other state begin by quietly wondering about this state which one does not even understand or fathom? One knows about it, but that's words. It's shallow. listening, feeling, observing, looking quietly, so much can be perceived and heard that in our normal daily noise totally goes under. Just yesterday, sitting in the meeting room and at times during quiet moments, listening to the raindrops. It's amazing. All the different drops, the different rhythms and intervals, and then a little bing from the radiator and bung from the radiator. And there were other sounds. And this incredibly sensitive capacity of the human being to listen, to hear. All of this, all of these nuances, sound and rhythm. Which no one has manufactured. No thought has invented that. It's there, it's happening. And the listening, the sensitivity and openness of listening is not separate from what is being heard. It's one flow, one movement of, if you want to call it life, being alive. And a fearful thought comes up in the mind, and a whole specter of a frightened body comes into being with all its nuances and sounds and feelings that we have words for, but if we leave the words aside and just listen to it as to this concert of raindrops and sounds, is that possible? Of course it's possible. When the words don't come in and the associations don't come in and the reactions. Because then we are removed from what's alive and live in what is memory, speculation, thought. Which sort of seems to float like a layer of smog. Over what's actually going on, above what's actually going on. I think that's why we all love, or most of us love, little children. Because they have this liveliness and this vitality and experimental, trying things out. But so quickly this is all smothered, either because they get into trouble with the things they do, breaking valuable equipment or vases, or running around places where they're not supposed to run. And of course school. So deadly. Sitting, a little child, 5 years old, sitting all day long at a desk. These days it's broken up a little bit. not quite that bad anymore. But also the live reactions of a child, and the repertoire of reactions for a child is very small. Mostly it's just either smiling or screaming. The smiling we love, the screaming we can't stand. And really not being, it hits one right in the pit of the stomach, or someplace when a child screams and cries. I don't think there's no other noise that is as wrenching as a child crying, a little child crying. The other repertoire is rage, tantrums. There's all the expression of, the child's expression of life. And sooner or later this is all smothered, controlled, repressed. One person told me, when I was 5 years old, I died to this live little boy, and I became a brain. Because this way I could please my parents and my teachers. And I wonder whether this hasn't happened in most of us, to some degree or another, having died to this live little organism, with its wonder and expressions and vulnerability, and become good, studious, or mischievous. That's the other identity open. Does one have to go back to childhood to enliven this little child? I don't know. This is this question which is brought up all the time. What's the difference between what we're doing in psychotherapy? Many people bring it up. I won't go into it here. We can maybe do this if people are interested in meetings. But as we said a moment ago, the whole past, not just of this childhood, but of the childhood of our parents, and their parents and their parents and their parents and grandparents, sits right here. We are the result of all of that. How will one meet all the stirrings inside, which may be utterly discomforting and painful, frightening, but maybe only through thought and association, maybe not actually when they're directly met. Then they're just what they are, without word or like or dislike. So can one begin to come to life, not at some future time when one is all straightened out or all enlightened. It'll never happen. If it doesn't happen now, when will it happen? And not with a big crash or bang or fireworks, but listening sensitively, attentively to all that goes on, being lost and found. With no end, no finality. Life has no finality. We think in those terms, but that's just the way the brain works. The computer has been programmed that way. Life is a movement, a flow. Where is it going to? Where is it coming from? These are all thoughts. And this here, which we didn't construct or build, this is part of this unfathomable wholeness of life. Is one making ideas out of this? Or just listening quietly to what cannot possibly put into words? Or else it is immediately distorted. Made narrow. Sometimes people say, I don't know how to do that. It's good. If one knew how to do it, one was caught up in the mechanism again. And that's the very thing that we want to be free of. Listening is no method, is no mechanism. Attending, observing, looking. There's no technique in that. There's just being open to what is. And if it's, as people say, but I'm not open, I'm all closed up, one has already put that into words. Is one attached to those words? To one's characterization of oneself? One has to look. Is it possible to be open to closedness? I think it is. If we don't have all these ideas about it. Like a child that sees a door as a door. There's nothing else. We will end here for today.